Welcome to True Alignment. I'm Edgar Papke.
I'm Ken Sagendorf. Thanks for joining us. We're live from the Gronowski Innovation Incubator in the Anderson College of Business and Computing at Regis University in Denver, Colorado.
And you never skip a beat on that, do you? And welcome to True Alignment, where the conversation is all about alignment. Alignment in our lives at a personal level, in our relationships, in our communities, the people that we work with, in our organizations, our teams, and the greater alignment as we look out across society and globally and the universal context for alignment.
So I can't help it. The movie reference has got to come in really early because the Love Actually, right? Love really is.
Alignment is
all around you.
All around you. There it is.
I can feel it in my fingers.
I can feel it in my toes.
Oh, boy.
Well, you know, it's funny.
I guess you can tell
that.
from that we've got another voice in. That wasn't Jim. Jim's here, too. Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Hey, guys. Welcome back.
Good. How's the family, wife and baby?
Good. Kyla and Juniper, and Juniper's starting to roll over, so that's pretty awesome. Uh-huh. So it's any day now. We'll be, like Ken said, chasing her around.
Yep. Oh.
And she's cooing and trying to talk, so it's fun.
Great. How are you doing, Kurt?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. We've been looking forward to this.
I'm very happy to be here, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, our guest, Kurt Gerwitz. We'll introduce him in a minute. I have more small talk to make. So,
Kurt with a K.
Kurt with a K.
Kurt with a K.
Yes.
Small talk. Please go ahead.
Just a little comment before we get on, because, you know, it's been a little while since we recorded an episode.
Yes.
And you know, I always so enjoy our intro music from Nick Smarto and the Boys. Yes. Right, the Skinny.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. You know, yesterday.
And hello to everybody at Google. Always a good thing to do.
Indeed. So, you know, music's just in your soul.
Yeah.
So, you know, yesterday with the passing of Tina Turner, you know, I was in the car, which I think there's no better place to listen to music than in the car. There's just something about it for me. But
your age,
they played Proud Mary, you know, the whole extended version with her and Ike Turner. And, you know, that's just such that intro she does about, you know, nice and easy. And, you know, we're going to start easy, but we're going to finish rough.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, there's something that tingles in your soul about hearing that song.
There's a certain, and when you think back to that, how many decades ago, you go back when that was first released and you kind of look at it, that's pretty raw. That's right there.
Yeah. Totally. Right.
There's
in that
no
horn
hiding.
intro.
There is no hiding in that anywhere. That's a great tune.
Yeah.
And so well done.
Yeah. And you know, it brings me back to, you know, the music, the way I intersected with music with my dad, and just, you know, music's just a kind of a great connector.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yesterday, in the same breath, it was a shout out to Bob Dylan. Day late, happy birthday. He turned 82. And still doing his, 90, 100 shows a year on the road. Absolutely amazing. My brother recently saw him as part of the front end of the tour he's on over in Germany. And he said it was just fantastic. Wow. Just a great performance. And like any other artist, you can have your on days or off days. Except for, of course, this podcast, which is always on. But and so there's that. That's just a consistency over that many shows a year, and to be able to succeed at that level is amazing.
Well, we're feeling this quite acutely, right? I mean, as we, I forget how many episodes we got out our first year, 37, 38, and now we have some life that's in the way, and you know, it's hard to be that consistent with things like this.
Yeah. And then there's a wonderful learning that comes with that. Is you just said, and then life gets in the way, and what does it get in the way of, and how? And then back to the idea of we need to be able to integrate all the different aspects of our lives and work towards aligning as we do that. And also a great reminder, and just to give context to it, you may recall that I went to the Cleveland Clinic for surgery in February, only to discover that I needed another one, which then we did in May. So it's been, the front end of the year has just been one big, recovery cycle that I've been in. And a quick reminder that the most significant events in our lives are unforeseen. and they just come out of nowhere, and the best laid plans, and this whole idea of what gets in the way of what is just amazing, because at the end of it, it's all different pieces of life that we have to be able to integrate, and there's a certain level of acceptance and letting go of control and not living with this false ideal that we can manifest life in the way that we want, because life is going to be happening to us.
Yeah. This is actually a wonderful segue for our guest today, and Kurt Gerwitz. Kurt, I'm going to share a little bit of the origin story about how you and I got introduced. Somebody that used to work here at Regis, and I had it wrong originally, and Kurt corrected me, knew Kurt's mom.
Yeah, that's right.
Knew Kurt's mom, and somehow he was here in town, and she said, you have to meet. And when Kurt and I met, and remember Regis University and this business college is inside of a Jesuit university. And the first time you and I met, you shared with me that you were in the Jesuits, which is not something, the Jesuits are an odd thing in the sense of we talk about it like we know everything about it inside the walls here, but outside the walls, people don't really know what that is. So, when I say I work at a Jesuit institution, people will say to me, are you a Jesuit? No. They'll ask a woman that works here at Regis, are you a Jesuit? Which women can't be Jesuits. So people don't really know. But the fact that you were in there, and I think as Edgar's sharing this kind of, what happens in our lives and what makes us consider and reconsider and constantly reevaluate. Kurt, you and I met, and then I heard this story, and then you worked in finance, and now you're teaching finance classes in our MBA, the best finance class in Colorado. But that's a whopper of a journey to go from being in the Jesuits to this. So tell us the Kurt story. How did you?
Well, I'll start with the absurd version of it. That's probably most memorable, or the sound clip for the podcast. Is that I went from a radical, fanatic follower of Christ to literally had the job as a money changer, which is if we know our Gospels, when Jesus gets loses his temper, gets angry, and throws the money changers out of the temple because it's God's house and it's a place for prayer, not a place for commerce. So the pendulum has swung back for me. I am finding a happy middle ground in my deep into my 40s here. But yeah, so I joining the Jesuits. You're right. Like I do I've done a lot of explaining this to people, and to get to alignment quickly, I usually just ask, are you Catholic? And then even within that realm, there's such a wide
breadth.
Yeah, there's such diversity in that experience of being Catholic or having gone to Catholic school. But so then it's like, okay, so you understand your regular priests, and then do you understand the ordered priests, the priests that come from an order such as the Christian Brothers or the Jesuits, for example? And then, so then I say, well, look, I took the vows. Temporary vows. I took 1-year vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And we lived in community. And then I just quickly tell people like what I did. I was only in for 1 year. So I had joined spiritual boot camp, we call it. And it's a 2-year process before you take permanent vows. So I will tell people that I was engaged to the church, but I did not marry her. And it is an exploratory process. So when it didn't work out for me, that was my path. That's a good outcome. It's like science. When you have results, you're happy with whatever they teach you and tell you.
What was the decision point for joining in the first place?
And that's a good one. I have a long version of this and a short version. I'll tell you the short version. If you want the long version, I'll let you pull it out of me.
We'll have to get the scotch out.
Yeah. I'll go the short version first. The short version is, it's something that, that the idea sparks in me, and a lot of people who follow this path have a similar story, that the spark starts, as you're becoming an adult. So I was 16 years old, and it was Father Bart Giger was teaching theology at my Jesuit high school that I was going to. And then, so fast forward, it was 8 years later, that I'm, filling out the paperwork and they want you to try to, they want you to experience the vows for a year before you join also. So the application itself is an adventure. It's it's a full psychological evaluation. And IQ test, because the Jesuits really are, they're educators. They want you to be able to get a PhD. It's kind of the educational standard. And so on the first day, they ask us to give a sermon and to tell our story why we're there. And I went full in, and I just spoke a metaphor. And I said, my friend called me on the phone, and I was sitting there watching TV, eating a po' boy, because we're in southern Louisiana, so we're going to call a hoagie sandwich a po' boy. And my friend needed help, and so you hang up the phone, and then you look at the TV and the po' boy, and you look at how comfortable you were, and you think that there's really no question at that point in your narrative on what do I do now? You go and help your friend. So I like that metaphor because the key word here would be it's a calling. And so I was certainly called to join. I don't believe, it's certainly not God's will that I'm a Jesuit today, obviously, because I'm happily married and not a Jesuit. But I learned a ton about spirituality, and it's a 500-year-old institution that's been studied by all the we were told they were studied by the KGB. They at times controversial in history, but always have a standard of excellence that I'm proud of.
Yeah. We use a book here in the Innovation Center written by Chris Lowney, who was also once a Jesuit, but left. He must have been one of the money changers, too, to go to work for J.P. Morgan. And he wrote the book, Heroic Leadership. And, he talks about many of those traits. The subtitle of his book is something like Leadership Lessons from a 450-year-old global company. It's a little bit older book now. But that was the Jesuits, because J.P. Morgan had put him in management training. And a lot of the things they did in management training were things they did naturally in the Jesuit order.
I find that to be very true in terms of leadership, because you have the kind of the pillars of that exploration. And so what does leadership look like from the Jesuit perspective or tradition? And it opens up with the idea of awareness. So, and simply when you look at the design of so much of today's leadership development, that's pretty much at the core. And it is. It's the core of the work that we do, because alignment is really about understanding your own behavior, and then the power of choice, the conscious choices that you have in your actions, what you do and say, and how do you create alignment through that.
And if you look at the history of it, or let me just add this one story about my history of it, and how alignment at something that you might, at first glance, a person might look at this and think, well, that's subtle or small. But then in my experience, over time, over history, it made a profound difference. So the Jesuits, we have the idea of the Mages, which is doing what is in when given a choice between things. One of the heuristics, the rule of thumb to ask yourself is, what gives the greater glory to God? So the Mages mean, like ad majorem Deo gloriam is the phrase, for the greater glory of God. And so you're kind of facing it with a choice, and it's like, well, it's all good choices. Well, so which one's greater? Which one's better? And that's in the Jesuit charism. I found myself teaching at it was hosted at a Jesuit church. It was a San Miguelian school. So what I tell people it was a Catholic charter school, but it was run by the Christian Brothers. And these are the institution that, as I understand it, has founded education the way we understand it today, where you have one teacher standing in a room of multiple students. We have to imagine that at some point in human history that was not the norm, that the norm was, only rich and one-on-one tutors, and everything else was, children just making it work, learning from their parents, and mostly working in the fields to keep us all fed. And then there was a third charism in the room, which was the school was actually run by the School Sisters of Notre Dame. So we would pray to Blessed Teresa of Gerhardinger, to Saint Ignatius, and to San Miguel. And so we would say the three prayers. So it was like this mixture of, and to an outsider, to a non-Catholic perhaps, it would just look like a room of Catholics. But when you're in the room, you got this, you could see the difference between these orders. And there's one more I can add to this story, which is I spent 2 years at a different school. It was the Brothers of the Holy Cross, and it is the Fathers of the Holy Cross. So it's the same order that runs Notre Dame, which is the predominant or preeminent archetype
football team.
Yeah, the Catholic school, the Catholic football
That's right.
team. Yes, the Notre Dame there, and they had a separate charism about becoming the man that you are.
That's what we got to throw Rudy in the mix as a movie reference. Like, there's no way you can't say Rudy after you mention Notre Dame. Sorry.
Yeah. So, well, the point I'm wandering around to this point here is that the San Miguelian charism, or the De La Salle charism, that's the same one, the La Sallian charism. That is, they would help anyone. They would help anyone in the, and so the way schools developed is that you would draw a line on a map, or draw a circle on a map, and that's the area, and then you would help everyone in that area. Well, if you know St. Louis or New Orleans, the Jesuit schools, Jesuit high schools there are drawing from the entire area, and they're drawing the best students because they think that that's the best way to help God, is to grab the best and the brightest, reach into the power structures at the top, and that's where we're going to affect change and do social justice work and transform the world and bring about a kingdom of heaven through these methods of reaching to where the power is. Whereas the De La Salle, or in St. Louis it was CBC, Christian Brothers College Prep, they would have different tracks for students, and those students could, you could learn at a lower level, but you needed to be from the neighborhood. So it was just this little thing that was written down. Here's the conclusion. This little thing that was written down, this Magis idea from 500 years ago, translated into profound differences in these institutions 500 years later.
This is such a business analogy right here, right? I mean, this idea that, and I think you said it earlier, that for all intents and purposes, if somebody walked in, they'd say there's a group of Catholics, but the people in the room knew there was differences amongst them. And I think, the tendency of a business leader to say, all my people are their version of Catholics, and yet they're all different. Mm-hmm. We see that in our work so much, Edgar.
And then there's also the idea of the interpretations that take place, and how important it is to go back to understanding the meaning of the words. And it goes beyond terminology. It goes into the value and belief system that it represents, and how that then comes to life. And we're talking about culture. We're talking about organizations through that lens of how they operate, much like in your example, you don't quite see the culture from outside. And when you're in it, heads up. And so, getting a seat on the bus, life on the bus can be very different and very unique. And understanding those elements of uniqueness are what then allow the individuals in the context to define the definitions of, to create definitions of success. What does success really mean? And what's the expectation for my own success compared to those that are in the hierarchy and have power and are looking and seeking to elevate that and further it? It's a heck of a... And that's the environment that you were in Louisiana?
So that job was in St. Louis, Missouri. That was
Missouri. Excuse me.
I had left the Jesuits in Louisiana, and I spent 2 years as a behavioral interventionist in the inner city in St. Louis, Missouri, and it's quite an adventure. It's a recipe for burnout. A lot of social workers will burn out after 2 years, and so
right.
But I wanted to add that to me, the big lesson here, so that all that happened to me in my early 20s. And then later, when I'm working on the board of an organization, a good one in New Orleans that was building houses called Project Homecoming. And we would spend a lot of time on the mission and vision. For me, it was like the power of a constitution, like when the power of the forming documents, or I heard you just mention the definition of success and the power of the written word and the power of each word. And so I would have pulled I was still even somehow pulling my hair out while we were parsing apart. What does this word mean? What does that word mean? I was like, no, we should be in the field right now driving nails into wood to build people's houses, and we're sitting here talking about this mission and vision, and how could that be so important? But I had a context for how it could be so important. On a 500-year scale, it was tremendously important.
Many teach, models of leadership through mission, vision, values. Edgar, of course, every organization we work with has these words down.
Yeah, or at least, or a statement of purpose.
What do you do if they don't?
I don't know that I've ever worked with an organization that, I think here's the challenge. I don't think it's that they don't have them. I think it's that they have them and they don't bear on the work.
Well, there's that. They have them, and then the behaviors aren't aligned, and leadership doesn't role model and reinforce the aligned behaviors. So that's one aspect of it. And I think there's also the other one that says that because another organization, we see this being used a lot, we use it. So definitions of teamwork, or we work with integrity. And that's actually a real fun aspect of the work we get to do, is to ask them to define. To say, here's the words that you're using. Let's define this, and let's talk about how it comes to life.
How it looks, yeah.
And how does it show up in your strategies, your customer experience, your employee experience? How does that happen, and what does that look like? And that becomes a really, really, that's a really, I'm going to say, fertile conversation. There's a lot there, because one of the things that happens is everybody in the room is going to have an interpretation. They're going to have their experience, their past experience that they bring with them. And then there's also those that are the keepers historically. So it may not be a 500-year-old institution, but an organization that's been around 17, 18 years and is constantly, we're working with one now, 17 years in business, and they're in rapid growth, and they're adding a lot of people. And the clarity through which they communicate the essence of what the organization is about becomes critical, and becomes critical in terms of the onboarding, how people integrate into the culture, how they contribute to it. Those are all aspects of having that kind of conversation and doing it well up front. And also talking about how things happen. Sometimes it's easy to define, and unless people are able to understand what it looks like behaviorally, much like behavioral intervention, there you go, right? It takes work, it takes effort, and it needs to be continuous. Yeah.
So Kurt, how did you, and I love that story. I've heard you tell it multiple times, but what was the decision point for leaving the Jesuits?
If I'm going to tell the truth, they asked me to leave.
Okay.
And but they knew something that I didn't see. They saw something I didn't see, and I saw it quick enough. One is that, speaking of alignment, they knew that the happiest people in that lifestyle and to those who don't know, it's the lifestyle of a monk. Are introverts on the whether you want to look at the Myers-Briggs, or I like the Big Five personally. And I am the
yeah, I just have to laugh because as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't fit.
I've never been in a group where we took the Myers-Briggs and I didn't score the highest score in extroversion in the room. So I know who I am, and the monk life was going to be a struggle for me and the people around me mostly. But the real God's narrative here is that my father's cancer got worse, and we would ask ourselves, should I have even joined the Jesuits, gone into a 10-year commitment? And to be clear, they brag about how it takes longer to become a Catholic priest through the Jesuit path than it does to become a doctor. why would I even start that if my dad had cancer? And well, we didn't know at that time when I joined, we didn't know how bad the cancer would go. He could have gone another 10 years or what did happen, which was it got worse. And so I got the opportunity to spend another year or two, I think it was 1 year, with him in St. Louis, and that's when I was doing the behavior work in the inner city.
So connect the dots on how you land in Denver, and you're teaching finance at the Denver World Trade Center.
Yes.
That's how we get the introduction. And now you're teaching finance for us. How did that path happen?
I'm going to try to keep it short. It wanders around a little bit, but it's so it goes from I'm doing the mission work. I'm working at a school that was 100% black, 100% free or reduced lunch, which is the measure of poverty, and you're in the work, and you can start to see how important the bigger decisions are. Like, is there enough money in the room? That starts to become, or not in the room. I mean, is there enough money in the system? Becomes a very important decision, or an important factor. And so I found myself more interested in looking around. Who are the I'm in my mid-20s, so I'm like, who are the adults that I want to be like? And it was the members of the board.
I'm still doing that. Go ahead.
Aren't we all?
Sophisticated children as we are. Go ahead.
When we should all. I think everybody. I think Edgar's cringing every time I use the word "should," but we should all have aspirations. We should have someone in our lives who's maybe 20 years ahead of us, and that's very inspiring. And we should have someone in our lives who's like 3 or 4 or 5 years ahead of us, who can, shows us the immediate next steps from where we are to where we want to go. And so I wanted to be like those members of the board who were wielding power to do good things, and that power came in the form of their networks. That power came in the form of their confidence, their own alignment, their understanding of aligning them, like how to align an organization to its mission, and to execute on that at that higher level. And they did something they could do something that I had zero skills in at that time, which was they could manage finances and understand finances. So my next part of my journey was to go get an MBA with a concentration in finance from the great university at Tulane, A.B. Freeman School of Business there, where I took the Birkenroad class that will inspire my vision for what I wanted to do here at Regis.
Yeah, that idea of modeling, it goes back to what you mentioned, Edgar, that a leader needs to model. When you onboard, you need to model. Like, there's a constant modeling, which is hard when you're bringing on all new people because nobody knows who to look for the models. Mm-hmm. And it's harder when you have a single founder or a single leader that won't let anybody else model. We've seen those models too.
Yeah, and it all goes through that one person. That brings up the idea that when you think about that role modeling and that reinforcement process, we talk different strategies. So you might get connected more into financial strategy at some point, or operationally what's possible in doing that. And so there's these different areas of strategy that we always wind up working with. The customer experience, right, which is product service development strategy, then market development strategy, marketing, selling, branding, etc. Operational, financial, and then people and culture. And then there's the 6th strategy, which is leadership development. And so many organizations fall short because they just look at that as part of people development. They don't quite see how important it is to have people throughout the organization, especially as you scale, that are role modeling and reinforcing a set of behaviors that we expect from leaders that are in alignment to the mission, the values of the organization, and that, in a way, inform others just through observation. They inform, and that becomes so critical. And yet there isn't enough of that dialogue, that conversation I think in some organizations it's happening, but certainly there's a need for it across a lot of organizations, especially as we look up to someone we're at a certain age, a certain point in our careers. There's that person at the top of the organization we look at, and in today's world, very often they're considered to be like a star, a celebrity. Well, that's not always going to be attainable, or you can't really get a sense of what that person is truly like. But the person you're working with directly, or that's within the context and environment that you find yourself in as far as leaders go, that's what makes that so critical, doesn't it? Yeah.
In all this contrast with, kind of how we think about business more popularly, right? I mean, we you mentioned this idea of being a star, right? We take the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates of the world. Right now we've created an idol out of Elon Musk, for better or for worse, right? And those companies, when you lose those people, you watch them spin a little bit.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't come out as well, and other times they actually come out a lot better.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they can be more grounded and it becomes more accessible. So now, Kurt, I want to come back to you. And so here you are now, you're teaching finance in the MBA program. What's next?
I feel like I want to spend a little time with what's in between getting my MBA with a concentration in finance from Tulane University and where I am now, because there's another decade in there, and it's the most recent decade to my life, and so it's way more like, I feel like what we've been talking about up to this point, to me, feels like ancient history. It's interesting how I'm as we're talking about it, I'm reflecting on it differently than I would have 10 years ago. So I worked at a bank. I did the foreign exchange. That was the money changing. I loved that work. And then I moved into an investments role. And my pivot into the investments role is fun because I got the opportunity to teach. That's when I started teaching at Tulane. I started teaching an investments class at Tulane, and then I moved into the investments role. So that was people often want to know, how did I become a teacher, a college professor? Because they think they want to do that, and I will talk any one of them out of that. I will try, and Ken, once in the classroom, Ken should only want the ones who have heard the reasons not to do it and still want to do it, because you're picking up it's a quixotic endeavor to teach. But so I've got right now I'm making money 3 different ways. I'm a fractional CFO for a friend of mine, and I kind of really like it. It's really like I'm building his financial model, and then I'm, he's never run budgets, so we're setting up budgets so that he can. And I started with, what was your big why? What do you want to, and he had this. It's actually quite an inspiring vision, but just in hearing it back from me, I think it amplifies the inspiration, the clarity that drives motivation and action. And he wants to get a boat and you can go down the Mississippi, you can go out of New Orleans, you can wrap around Florida, you can catch I don't know the Northeast very well, the Erie Canal, and get into the Great Lakes and somehow get back to the Mississippi River. I don't know how you get back to the Mississippi River from the Great Lakes, but it's like a circle of the front half of the United States.
They're on the boat.
On the boat. Yeah. And so I'm doing that. That's number one. Number 2 is I'm working at a startup it is the definition of alignment, the work that we do at the startup. It's called Head Start, and it's a piece of artificial intelligence. It's a keyword neural network that matches job applications to job descriptions. And we can process hundreds of thousands of job applications coming in and match them to the needs of our client, the business, and give it a match score. So to understand it, I would ask somebody, if I gave you 200 resumes, what would you do? And the answer is, you would use my technology to rank those resumes, and then you would look at the top 10 of that, and then you would continue on with the common sense process of interviews and however else you want to discover the alignment. But let the artificial intelligence do the heavy lifting, the hard work. And so it's an automation technology that saves money and time on the one hand, and then I call it the holy grail of business because it's actually doing really good on the other hand. It happens to have, when, as it turns out, this should not be surprising us humans, but it does, that when you take the human bias out of a process, you get better results. And by better, in this case, I actually mean more diverse. So we've increased female hiring 20%, increased, it's a British company, so they measure racial diversity. They call them Afro-Caribbean hires. They increase that as well. And so it's so we're doing good, saving people money, and hopefully we can endure this upcoming recession that I think we're headed into. But my third and fourth, my third way to make money, and my favorite way, and the reason Ken and I know each other so well is because I teach the best finance and investments class in all of Colorado. It's Anderson Reports. It's the capstone course of the finance concentration piece of the MBA program at Regis University, Anderson College of Computing and Business. And it's amazing. We do a deep dive on a publicly traded company that's headquartered in Colorado. So we've covered 4 companies, and I'll name those shortly. But to give a little context, some of the publicly traded companies that are headquartered in Colorado that you might have heard of, Dish is one of the big boys. My wife works for Ball Corp, where your aluminum cans come from. Another one of the big boys. There are 13 analysts covering Ball Corp. And the companies we cover, we want the smaller guys. I want the, so we've covered a company called Farmland Partners, Inc., and that is a farmland REIT. So I have fun with my students, and when we pull up the financials, because they're publicly traded, you can see the financials. That's part of the game here. And we look at them and say, where do they pay taxes? Trick question, REITs do not pay taxes because REITs have to, by the code of the law under being a REIT, they kick out 90% of their profits as dividends. Those dividends will get taxed by the investors. So that's where it's not as if the government was going to not take its piece.
Or we'd all be invested in REITs for sure.
Right, but it's a rare case where they're not doing double taxation. There's only single taxation on the dividend side, and so we've covered FPI Farmland, and that one was our first one. It was one of the best because we scooped the Wall Street Journal. There's a narrative around that company which I'll set aside, and we can pull it back up if you want. We also covered a company called WOW, Wide Open West. Teresa Elder was the female CEO, which we love to see, and she had gone to Creighton University, so another Jesuit university, and that might be why she was interested in connecting in. So the Jesuit network is super powerful. Last I checked, the numbers were something like 48 high schools and 24 Jesuit universities that they were running, but those numbers have changed, I'm positive, by now. And the other company we've covered was Riot, RIOT was the ticker, and that one was hard. That one was we hopefully communicated the risk to our readers because that was a cryptocurrency company. They did one thing. They mined Bitcoin, but they were publicly traded, so it was a way for a public investor to get into Bitcoin without having to understand the wallet system. You could just go through the traditional financial system. And, that we were covering them right before the crypto crash. And so they were, at the time we covered them, they were turning, I'm not going to get these numbers exact, but let's say $16,000 worth of electricity. And they would set up, and they were in West Texas, and they started in there's a name for the electricity that gets generated that is just not used at all, like the overcapacity. Like if you have a windmill that's,
putting it back in the grid.
Yeah, if it's not going into a battery, then it's getting wasted. Or they were next to hydroelectric. They started next to hydroelectric, but in West Texas, they were able to find solar and wind very easily, and so they could turn $16,000 worth of electricity into a single Bitcoin, which at that time was selling at 40. I think we're in the 25s, 29s right now. And they were making $240 million a year on that. So they're just printing money. But I would challenge my students. I said, Okay, the class goes for 16 weeks, and for 16 weeks I asked them every week, explain to me how crypto is not just pixie dust. And the reason they're not able to do that is not just because they're MBA students and they're not that sophisticated with finance. It's because crypto, as far as we can tell, is just pixie dust. So as is fiat currency as well. I get it. I see this. We saw both sides of the argument, but that was a really hard company to predict where the stock was going. So that was the only one that we were, we didn't get the call correct on. And this next one, this last one, and I'll take a breath after this. We're covering this semester Pure Cycle Water Corporation. These guys, they're here in Denver, of course, and they're a water utility. So I thought, oh, this is going to be a nice little break from having done a crypto company, which nobody understands. Anybody who pretends to understand crypto is, at some degree, lying to themselves or to the markets. And it can be understood at different levels, but we don't know what it's going to become, right? Right. So I thought it was going to be an easy utilities company. Well, we had to cover water rights in Colorado. That's complicated. And then we discovered quickly that they vertically integrated, which means they wanted to create their own customers. They became their own customers. So they became a land developer. They bought 900 acres east of Denver in a place called Sky Ranch, and they just started building houses. They contract the builder, and then these guys are so. And then they got so good at this is some form of diversification. Well, I'm telling the story that it's complexity to my students that they had to, we had to do 2 industry analysis reports because they're in 2 completely separate industries, or not, yes, joined at the hip, but very different. And then they went into a third, which was rentals. So some of the houses they were selling, and then some of the houses they're going to keep and that's a beautiful hedge against interest rates, because as we see interest rates going up, the housing sales in theory will go down, mortgages will go down as interest rates go up. That's just a thing that happens in the world. And so to mitigate that, to hedge on that, they would go into rentals. So if interest rates go up, they can rent. If interest rates go down, they can sell. And the story is so good that these companies, these smart people, and these fascinating business models are right in our backyard here in Colorado. And their students get to go interview management. They get to go see. That's my only ask of the company, is to spend at least 1 hour. And these companies have all been very generous with their time, and they connect with the students, and they really teach them that that business model and how the finances flow through it. The students have to make a quite sophisticated financial model, and that the model, here's some of the alignment, is that the model has to align to the strategy that the company is saying that they're going to pursue.
All right, so they actually see the performance indicators that directly relate back to and inform the strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kurt, as you talk about those companies, one thing that I've known about you, but I've never really I've never said it out loud like this. And as you and I were talking about, these financial models, and then you build them and then they break, and then you got to add something else to them. I think you enjoy that, though. I think that you enjoy the idea that I can structure something, but I'm still curious about what else is going in.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this, what you can't see is the big grin on his face.
Yeah, totally.
The whole time that you're talking about this, Kurt, you're just grinning from ear to ear.
There's a beauty in the complexity, but you should know the beauty's in the simplicity on the other side of complexity. I'm smiling because we're done, Ken. The 16 this spring semester, the 16 weeks, it's behind me. If you'd have caught me 4 weeks ago, I wasn't smiling one bit. Didn't smile for 3 weeks in a row. No, I like so there's the thing I teach the students is that the accountants prepare financial statements, and financial analysts read the financial statements. We're the consumers of the financial statements. And there's the difference between a finance number and accounting number is just the whole thing about like the beauty of statistics. And I am teaching a 4-hour statistics workshop coming up on September 9th. 9th. September 9th, the Saturday after Labor Day. Yes. And there's a beauty in finance numbers because it's the future. We're predicting the future. That's fun. That's the piece. I love, predicting the future.
But and here's what I hear. Yes, and you also like if I find out something new, that it's going to get mixed up. I think in our leadership work, in our work with cultures, this is where people often get frustrated because they feel like I figured out the model and now I should just have to work.
Yeah. The idea of predictability and then having control. It's going to work the way I need it to. It's predictable. It feels, there's a great deal of psychological safety that comes with that.
Yeah.
That when it gets disrupted, heads up.
Yeah. And you watch the people that are, and I think that grin that Edgar mentioned comes a little bit because you're
excited about the work for sure.
Yeah, the work is there, but also you know that you're going to find out something new and something else needs to go in the model then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to do that work. I mean, it's not these things they're living. I mean, any organization is living.
There's a balance between chaos and order. And you build the model and you think there's order, but I'm smiling because I maybe, it's from my childhood trauma, but I like the chaos. Like, right? Like,
there's the title, Jim. I like the chaos.
I mean, I have to check that, right? Like, because if you're a person like me listening to this and you like the chaos, then you need to be very careful that you're not creating the chaos. Because the purpose, the meaning in life is going from chaos into the order.
Yeah, and we can tie that back to your extroversion too, and you already know that, so we don't have to go there a whole lot. But yeah, if there's not enough excitement around, if people aren't engaged enough, I'll find a way to get them engaged.
Yeah, I think one of the myths I break, and near the end of the class is, spoiler alert, is that we do all this work to come up with a model, and it's very necessary. And what you're really doing is you're like, what is the assumption and how important is the assumption? Because those are two different questions. And that's everything, right? Having the model, having the formula that's laid out in front of you that should work. And then knowing that first of all, knowing how precarious how wild your assumptions are. Like, what's the precipitation we're going to get in Colorado next year? That's when you're covering a water company, you're predicting the weather, and so you get into chaos theory and why we thought at one point, humans thought that we could, if we just knew enough information, we could predict the weather a year out, and we can't. We just, it seems like now it's like, no, well, maybe we'll never get more than 2 weeks out for predicting the weather, and so you get these predictions, but if you think that the world around you is ordered and that the finance people and that they know, yeah, y'all are laughing because you know exactly where this is going. If you think it's all like that, people have it figured out and it's clear, or what's the word I'm looking for, that you can rely on these numbers or you're confident with these numbers, well, now once you've built them the way they're really built in the real world and you realize, oh, it's a lot of assumptions for one. And then you're predicting the future, and that's fun to try, and you're going to be wrong. When I was working in foreign exchange, we're tracking the numbers, the exchange rates down to the pip, which is the 1/10,000th of a number. And so the only thing we knew is that you could not predict that. Like, you would never get that right. There's a 0%. I'm sorry. How do I say this?
There's no such thing as a straight line.
Right.
Yeah. Only in our imaginations.
Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. If you express it as a percentage and round it to the nearest whole number, it's 0% chance that you're going, like, so if you get the direction right, well then, if it's a random walk, you got a 50-50 shot. And I just I think it's beautiful the way math describes reality and the way it plays out into business, and it filters through our psychologies to become our decisions in reality.
Yeah, because at some point when you think you just separated completely from the emotional aspect, you realize, the smirk on your face says everything, Kurt. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So now, my students, when someone shows them a number, they should have the
we should have developed their skepticism.
Nice. It's a
And
good
if,
outcome.
and if I get them to the next level, develop their
Curio-
cynicism.
Well, that difference between
Inquiry.
skepticism and curiosity, right?
Curiosity,
yeah.
inquiry. Do I understand my skepticism and the source of it? That's a nice one to tap into.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure. Well,
I'm
Kurt-
seeing it the way that I'm seeing it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today and sharing a little bit about your journey and Anderson Reports. It's fantastic to have you share that with us. Thank you.
And we're going to certainly have you back at some point so that we can get an answer to the question with your interesting background and your history and your journey, the what's next. And so we'll look forward to hearing about that.
I look forward to learning it myself.
Good answer.
Good answer.
Very well done. Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us out there for True Alignment. As always, questions, thoughts, comments, anything at all, truealignment.com.
Info.
We're back now that we've had the pause through the first half of the year with life.
With life.
And living that. And so we're back, and you can look forward to our weekly podcasts again for the remainder of the year. And with that, again, let us know. Questions, thoughts, comments, anything at all, truealignment.com. info@truealignment.com would be the email. And you can reach out to us and let us hear from you. And we will get back to you, that's for sure. So thank you again. I'm Edgar Papke.
I'm Ken Sagendorf. Have a good day, everybody.
Live aligned.
Live aligned indeed.
Kurt.Gerwitz.com.
Yeah. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, if you'd like to learn more about our guest today,
If you'd like to learn more about me, Kurt Gerwitz, go visit kurt.gerwitz.com. You'll be redirected to either my LinkedIn profile or my YouTube channel, or perhaps Anderson Reports.
Awesome.
Don't use that.
I'm using that. Oh, yeah, it's going down.